Welcome back. We're kind of winding down our journey, learning about these people that lived in the 4th century in Cappadocia, in that part of Turkey. And I hope you've enjoyed the journey and getting to know them. We've talked about a number of the women, and today I just want us to take a little bit of time. We're going to focus on someone whose name we don't know. And as a matter of fact, we've had to kind of piece together some of the pieces of history to figure out where in the world this girl should be in the story. I'm going to just tell you that I believe that this final story, called The Fallen Virgin, is about one of the daughters of Emily, or Emilia. That means that she would be a sister of Macrina, the younger. She'd be a sister of Theosebia. She would be a sister of Basil the Great. She'd be a sister of Gregory of Nyssa. There are other members of that family, but she would be a part of that family. An incredible family, if you want to think about it. We're told that this young lady was beautiful. We have a story about this beautiful young lady that comes to us through a letter. Now, it's a letter that's written by Basil the Great, and it's written to the fallen virgin. It's kind of sad to think that that's what this girl's name is all the way through history. And there are people that have tried to surmise who it is, but little by little, we've been able to piece together enough of the story that we begin to realize that she is part of this incredible family. So I just want you to imagine that she is this little girl, one of the youngest born to the family, while they're still living in the city of Caesarea, while the family still has wealth and resources. But you know, Mom and the big sister, they decided to sell everything and to go live in the country and to begin this life of living together and sharing together with others. She would not have had any choice in that decision, and so the family would have taken her and she would have been raised out there in the country. One would assume that she had a great life out there and enjoyed it. It was wonderful. And we read that at a very young age, she committed herself to being a virgin and to only serving Jesus Christ. Now again, we're told that she was beautiful. And evidently out there in the country where they lived, there must have been some young men that would come and hang around. And it seems that there was a young man that would come and he would hang around the community, and evidently they struck up a relationship. What was she to do? She'd already committed herself to just being a virgin and living there and serving Jesus all of her life, but yet she has now fallen in love with a young man. They decide to elope. What it does say is that he kidnapped her, but generally in that period of time, it means that there was an agreement here that they were going to run off together, because that was the only way that they could actually run away and they could end up getting married. And they did. The story that we read from the letter is that we discover that, the young man ends up talking to Basil and saying, hey, she wanted it as much as I did. She ran off with me. That's all okay, and all that. You see, he was telling this to Basil because by now the father has died and Basil is now the head of the family. But I just want you to imagine this. The head of the family is your big brother. We remember him as Basil the Great. He's the bishop. He's the head of the church in that part of the country, and you have just run off. He writes this letter as someone who is brokenhearted. How could you steal my little sister? And then he says to his sister, how could you do this? He said, you have committed adultery against Jesus Christ. And you just hear his broken heart. And you're saying, now, Carla, how in the world do we get to the virtue of patience in this story? I think it comes apart in twofold. One is to look at the patience in Basil, because while he comes down hard on her and he is brokenhearted and he cannot believe that this has happened, there's a turning point in his letter. I have to tell you, when I discovered this letter and I was doing the research on this, I was sitting in a Starbucks in Manchester, England, and I literally sat in that Starbucks and the tears were flowing down my face. When I realized that this great man who had such a love for God and wanted righteousness and virtue in his household, but his love for his sister reached out over those pages and he just said to her, okay, that's all the stuff that's happened, But God is patient with you. God still loves you, and you can be redeemed. And suddenly Basil ends the letter by putting himself in the story of the prodigal son, but now he's the brother, and he's standing on the road, and he says, I'm going to be standing there, and my arms are going to be wide open, and I'm going to be waiting for you to come home. And he said, let the people complain that I have thrown a party and I'm celebrating. It doesn't matter. You are welcome back home. The amazing part of that story is that you've got this man of God, the leader of the church, who shows us what it means to practice patience. Patience with a little sister that maybe just didn't get it right. But we also find in this the virtue of a great God who's patient with us, because years later, when their mom dies, it's the friend, Gregory, the theologian, Gregory of Nazianzus, who writes an epitaph for us. And he says, Emily, whose children were an army of saints, both married and unmarried. And it tells us the story. Yeah, maybe of a fallen virgin, but of a story of incredible restoration that could come. She couldn't go back to being a virgin, but she could still be transformed into the image of God because she was restored. And she dies. When her mom dies, even this sister is remembered as being a member of the army of saints. God is patient. The question is, are we patient? Are we patient enough to be long-suffering, to love those around us, to be willing to do whatever it takes so that they are welcomed back home? Who do we need to be patient with? That's the challenge that we have from the story of the fallen virgin. And finally, this all comes to conclusion when we discover that there is the practice of faith, hope, and love. And all of this has all been intertwined. It's taking us on a journey that says, come, follow Jesus, imitate Christ, follow in his footsteps, practice doing the things that Jesus did. And somewhere along the way, somebody's going to look at you and they're going to say, is that who I think it is, or do I see Jesus in them? And that's what happens, because these virtues are uncommon.